Hello and welcome to the Wise Yourself Up podcast. I am your host, Carla McGreevy, and in today's episode, we're going to talk about the emotional map of the body. How are you all? It is a very wet Monday morning in London, and I have just been adjusting since come back from holiday. I only got back on Wednesday. Yeah, and it's only Monday, so very early days. I went and watched Substance, the new Demi Moore film, on Friday night. It was so good. Really, really good. I know there's been a lot of mixed reports, but I loved it. And I love Margaret Qualley too, who's on it, who stars in it, sorry. Margaret was in The Maid. And if you haven't watched The Maid, I think I mentioned The Maid in the last episode, because I've just recently rewatched it and now Margaret was in this as well. So they're both brilliant in it, both absolutely stunning. It is a hard watch. You do jump, and like I was in my jumper, out of my jumper, on top of my seat, hiding underneath my seat, everything. And the audience, like everybody who's watching the film was really responsive to it. There was a lot of laughter, a lot of screams, a lot of jumping. I found some parts really funny. And I don't want to spoil anything, but for me, it could have ended a wee bit earlier. They sort of dragged it on a bit at the end. And it's basically a film about beauty standards and how women aren't allowed to grow older and the pressure put on women and the way the patriarchy treats women growing older and the fixation on youth, on very young women in our world. And the men were cast perfectly. They were disgusting. So definitely go and see it and let me know what you think. It's funny. I had an incident in the shop. So I was someone who used to be very reactive, right? So that's my natural setting. Response flexibility is where a person has space to respond rather than automatically react. And trauma makes it hard for people. It constricts that ability, okay? And the more we heal, the stronger the response flexibility becomes, the more space we get to respond. And so I'm laughing because I notice sometimes, it really doesn't happen for me, especially when it comes to men, strange men shouting at me on the street. And so it happened in a local Sainsbury's here. I was in the shop and I was standing in the queue, but there was like two ways to stand in the queue, like one directly in front and then one from the side, okay? And so I was standing there waiting on the cashier finishing with the customer in front of me. And then I noticed that then there was a queue created to the right. This older man came and queued at the other side after me, like maybe 5-10 minutes after me. And then the cashier finished with the customer and I went up to the cashier and then this old man bounced over to me. Now, I'm saying old man because he was cheeky to me. He wasn't old. He was an older man and he wasn't 90. If he was 90, I probably would have let it go. But he was around, I'd say, 50s, right? So he was an older man, right? And he starts aggressively shouting at me that he was there first, pointing his big, ugly finger in my face and just being so aggressive. And I was just, my face was so sour and so cheeky. And I was like, I was here first. And, I didn't shout back, but I had a lot of anger in my voice. And, I was just looking at him like, don't you absolutely dare get back in your place over there. And the cashier didn't really know what to do. But the man went back to his space in the queue. But for me, I just find it very hard because you can respond. Like, would it be better to kill him with kindness and respond really sweetly? Like, oh, sorry, I was here first. I don't know. Right. Anyway. But that's where I am with that because there's no way if I was a man, he would even have dared to do that. And it really, really annoys me how men speak to women in public. It's almost like a woman can do no wrong. Just say I didn't see him, and I was in the wrong, but to react like that to me, Like, women can't make any mistakes in the public sphere, such as your driving, such as X, Y, and Z. And a man is so aggressive to you. And it's happened to me a few times in different things, just like, for example, driving and parking and things like that, where they're so aggressive. And there's just no way they would speak to me like that if I was a male. But to say, fair enough, I'm not at the space where I can meet it with kindness, but I'm not being violent. Like, there's a part of me, there is a part that wants to be violent, and that part is kept inside. I have accepted it's winter, have you? And it's proper cold compared to last year. I remember last year it was 20 degrees sometimes in London, but it's like proper winter cold. And the course is going well, the compassionate inquiry course. Big stuff's been unraveling, as it always does. I have to be the client as well as the therapist in the sessions. And just talking about trauma and studying trauma a lot brings up a lot. So yeah, the healing's never ending, and sure, we'll be still looking at our childhood stuff when we're in our 80s. And that is all my crack. That's it. Okay. Today, we're going to talk about how emotions are held in the body and how there is an emotional map to the body, and different organs are connected to different emotions. And just to start off with, when I first met this material, and I don't know what reality is, does any of us, because we all live in an echo chamber and we all surround ourselves with like-minded people. So it's hard to know what is normal for the majority, if that makes sense. But I suppose the majority isn't connected to the material of trauma and isn't connected to how intelligent the body is and this material that we're going to discuss right now. And so when I first met this material 10 years ago, it would have been my first yoga teacher training course. So I went to Bali for that. I studied with Emily Cruiser, who is High Vibe Yoga on Instagram, an incredible teacher who studied underneath Sally Kempton. And I also studied underneath Andrea Boni at this time, who is an amazing Italian meditation teacher, both of whom you can look up online. And this is when I first heard this whole crack with The Body Keeps the Score, the book by Bessel von Koch. If you haven't read it, read it. It's changed your life. And the whole education around emotions are held in your body. Now, when I first met it, I was like, this is a load of shite. I was someone with a lot of trauma. I was someone who was very addicted to my brain, very ego, very in the masculine, which is for most people in a patriarchal society. We are all encouraged to be like this. And so I rejected it all. And I suppose it's sort of like when, you believe the world is flat and you think about people back then first being told the world is actually round, it's not flat. People would have thought it was insane. And I think, for a long time, we've just believed that the brain is the most intelligent organ and the rest of the organs don't really contribute much in terms of intelligence to our relationships in the emotional world. So if you feel this way, that it's a ridiculous concept, the intelligence of the body, you're in very good company, because I was exactly the same. But I think over the past 10 years, that has changed, and the research that we have now backs what ancient yogis and hippies have always said. And of course, when it comes, just to preface this with, there's always blips in the system. Usually for most people, this map makes sense. But for some people, they may feel anger in a different part of the body. But for most people, this matches. And it also matches Chinese medicine and their teachings of the body and different schools of thought. And over the past 10 years, from when I first met the emotional map of the body, it's just been confirmed more and more to me, and especially through working with different bodies, how people connect with this material. And it is true for me and a lot of people where they connect with this similar map. And the reason why this is useful, it's so that we can listen to the body. When we're getting sensations in the body, then we can start to make sense of what emotion we're actually feeling, which is very difficult in the world we live in. We tend to name perceptions more than emotions, and most people will go into storytelling when you ask them how they feel, as opposed to internal sensations in the body, which is what emotions are. And emotions are always truth, where perceptions aren't. how we perceive things is not the truth. I think of course, it's Gabor Mate says you can't argue with emotion. You feel how you feel. However, what the mind tells is a different story. And just to reaffirm that the body is always telling the truth, and this is why this information is important. Let's begin with the left-hand side. The left-hand side is the feminine side of the body. Regardless of gender, this world, healing of this world, healing of our community, healing of ourselves needs the rise of feminine. The patriarchy has diminished the feminine and the importance of the balance between feminine and the masculine for health. The feminine is the ability to nurture, the ability to be intuitive and to feel what is invisible to the eye. The right-hand side of the body is connected to the masculine. It's connected to doing, action, and giving, producing. The greatest plan that we have is our evolution. It's the most intelligent thing that's ever happened. The ability we have to create a baby is a miracle. Our existence is a miracle. And so it makes sense to look at our evolution of humanity and how we were created from fetus baby into human form is the most intelligent thing we can do to understand ourselves and to heal. And that's what happens in body mind centering, which was developed by Bonnie Cambridge. And that's what somatics looks at. It looks at the intelligence of the body, and it looks at the development plan we had and how we grew into human form is how we can help people heal and reconnect to a real profound power and intelligence. And so that's what I found really fascinating was when we look at the evolution of humanity and the evolution of a fetus, how a baby grows, it matches. 540 million years ago was the first life form in the ocean, and we were like wee tadpoles, which is exactly what a fetus looks like when the cells start to develop and grow. It's the same thing that happened in the evolution of humanity. We turned from tadpoles almost into like wee prawns, and then in the like fish. Well, would it be fish? Yeah, we would be sort of fishy like. Sorry about that. And then into like a lizard. So the wee arms and the legs grow, our tail and our heads bigger than our arms and our legs. And then we moved on to land then and more onto all fours and the monkeys and trees, which is what like a toddler would remind you of, right? We monkeys. And then we were able to stand into human form, which is what happens, babies into adults. And so if we go back to our conception, so just 5 weeks from our conception, from the egg cell meeting the sperm cell, and the cells, through their intelligence, no thinking involved. Like your mummy didn't go, right, it's time to think her brain into creation. There's no thinking involved. It was all surrendered to the intelligence of the body and the cells knew exactly what to do to create you. And so from 5 weeks from conception, the heart forms. And that's what backs the growing evidence that the heart is actually the most intelligent organ. It is not our brain, as we have been led to believe for so long now, and that attachment to our thinking because we think the brain is the most intelligent. It is not. It is the heart. And the heart has its own central nervous system. And this is one of the favorite pieces of research I've came across. And always I will link the research I share in this, because if you're anything like me, you'd be like, I don't believe her. That's so shit, blah, blah, blah. So it's always good to do your own research into what I share. And some of it is scientifically backed and some of it is theory. And I'll share when I'm sharing science and when I'm sharing just ideas that people have that make sense to me. There was research done. If you go on the HeartMath Institute, you'll find lots of scientific research around the intelligence of the heart. And one of the pieces is this. There was an experiment done, a scientific experiment done, where people were shown different images from a computer, and some of it was emotive and some of it wasn't, such as a table would not be emotive, whereas a baby would be emotive. And what the research found was the heart could predict things before it happened. The heart sensed that there was a motive image going to be shown before it did. And obviously it found that the heart reacted I think it was around 6 seconds before the brain did. So that is amazing. And that is the importance of making the space to feel your heart, because it knows before events happen. And I have a really powerful example of that with my grandmother. It's one of my favorite stories. And my grandmother doesn't really believe in all this, what I'm sharing with you. You know, she was a very Catholic woman, very practical. And the night before my mummy got lifted, my mummy was lifted when she was 17. It would have been the 70s, right? So the height of the Troubles. My granny went to wash the dishes, and her whole body was vibrating. And she swears by this story. She doesn't understand it. But I believe it now with the information I know about the body, that the heart was creating so much vibrations through her body that she was shaking, and everything she touched began to shake. And she went to bed that night, and my mummy was lifted the next morning. So my grandmother very physically received a sign that something was going to happen. My granny knew that something bad was going to happen. She didn't know exactly what it was. So that's one of my favorite stories from my bloodline. And it's good to ask, because I'm sure your grandmothers, if you have anybody around that age, have different stories of how they used to navigate this world. Okay, so let's go back to the body plan. So the heart grows first, and how does your first heartbeat happen? Your mother sends an electrical pulse from her heart to yours that jump starts it. Isn't that so incredible? And it makes sense to how a baby is so connected on a sensory level to a mother's emotions and reacts so much to the mother, and how important that relationship is, and why it is deeply traumatic for a baby to be separated from its mother, or to not be seen and nurtured by their mother. Then the central nervous system is created. All the electrical impulses, the ability to sense is created. And that just shows the importance of the ability to feel and sense, because the brain is developing, but the fetus can't cognitively think the way we can. That comes on much later, which is very interesting, isn't it? Conscious thinking comes much, much later in our development. Yet we think it's the king of the castle, and it's definitely not. What is important for a baby's development is its ability to feel and move and sound, not its ability to talk and to think. That's what drives a baby's growth, and it's knowing to learn to crawl and walk. It's not sourced through thinking, it's sourced through feeling and the intelligence of the body. And it's so interesting when we look at that relationship, our first relationship between a baby and its parents. There's no language, there's no words, it's all sensory. It's all about attuning to each other's emotions and feeling and touch and movement. And that's why it's so important that we come back to those elements in healing, so that we can connect our wholeness, because a baby is born innately whole. And then when we look at the skeleton system, the first to be developed is the occipital bone, which is the seat of the brain, this big, massive, my head is massive. I have a small face, but I have a huge head. I'm like, what do you call it, Mars Attack? But so the brain sits in the occipital bone, which sort of looks like, I'm doing a hand demonstration if you're watching on YouTube. And the sacrum is created together. So the occipital bone and the sacrum, and they're fused together. So they're known as the sacred twins of the body. And then the two bones separate, and the 33 keys of the vertebrae are created. And this is the pathway between heart and brain, heaven and earth. It is one of the most powerful pathways we have is the spine, which I just am obsessed with. What's one of the oldest parts of our body in our evolution of how a human grew from a tadpole in the ocean over 540 million years, and how you grew from a wee tadpole in your mummy's belly. Those bones are one of the oldest parts of you. And so when we feel lost, when we want to come home in somatics, we really want someone to sense and connect into the spine, the seat of their brain, and the sacrum, which is also known as the sacred bone, as it's the seat of your vulva, your womb, your yoni space. Another thing I love about bones is that they grew in spirals, which reminds us of trees, right? And, we always think that we grow, in straight lines, and we don't. We grow round and round and round and round, which we all know that feeling, and it makes sense. And we all know that trees communicate to each other through a huge network. It's accepted in the world of trauma and healing, the theory that Dan Siegel provided of interceptive neurobiology, where our central nervous systems and our brains affect each other. Your partner's central nervous system affects yours, their emotional state affects yours. It's important to know this connection, but if we're not connected to ourselves truly, then we get too pulled by the external network. Does that make sense? I will cover that again because that's a big topic. I'm going to continue with staying with the emotional body. And so we can look at the bones. They're like trees, right? They're so sturdy, so dense, so hard. And they offer us so much support within our bodies. Okay, let's keep going. So next, around the heart, wrapped around your heart are your lungs. And there's a really powerful podcast. Sorry, it's not a podcast, it's a TED Talk from Max Storm. So I really urge you to go listen to that. The lungs are the organ of transformation. They are their ability to change, to transform, and grief is held here. That's why a lot of people cry when they begin to consciously breathe. And what Max Storm beautifully covers in this TED Talk is how many health conditions such as insomnia, eczema, panic attacks, usually a high majority of these is unprocessed grief manifesting in the body. And he works with a lot of CEOs, a lot of leaders who typically wouldn't take time to grieve, would have a lot of pressure to keep on working. And when he works with them with breath work to heal their body and these illnesses that are presenting in the body, it's a lot of unprocessed grief, and they cry a lot in the sessions, and then their symptoms begin to ease. And usually it's deaths of people that happened a long, long time ago. When we allow ourselves to grieve, we transform. And also love always marks us and changes us. And it's a gift to the person who we loved and who's left this world that we change. If you've been listening this far into the podcast, first of all, thank you so, so much. I just love the gorgeous community that is building with this podcast. I wanted to interrupt just to say that if you're feeling stuck and you feel like you're going around in circles with your healing journey, it can be a sign that you are too much in your head when it comes to healing. The body communicates 80-20 to the brain, and that's why a bottom approach works best, which is what I offer. The body and breath are the true vehicles for change. To breathe is to feel, is to heal. So if you're ready to finally truly love yourself and listen to what your body is trying to communicate to you, I offer online one-to-one therapeutic sessions to help you to do this. In the sessions, we work together using breath work, somatic movement, to help you move through any resistance you're currently holding, and to help you get to the heart of what your body is really trying to tell you. And that's where I come in. I can help you see where the body and the mind are telling two different things, and it's to remember that the body always tells the truth. So if you're someone who's really ready to go all in on your healing journey, head to the link in my show notes to apply to work with me one-to-one. Okay, let's get back to the episode. Okay, the stomach. So the stomach is really high up, sort of in the center, more towards the left slightly, and it's really close to the heart. A lot of people can feel their heart in their stomach. I mean, I know I've felt this a lot. Like your heart literally feels like it's dropped and it's in your stomach. And people, when I ask them to touch their heart, will touch very low down because that's where they can feel the physical beat. The heart is actually located to the left and above the diaphragm, whereas the stomach is below the diaphragm, but they're all pretty close in space. And it makes sense, right? When we break up with someone, we can't eat. The heart and stomach are so close together. And it's also, the stomach is connected to acceptance, the ability to accept in food. It's one of the first few stages of our digestion, and the stomach is connected to acceptance. Your stomach is the size of a fist, where your heart is the size of your two fists, which is amazing how much bigger your heart is than your stomach. And yeah, so it makes sense why we can't eat when we're heartbroken, right? when someone breaks up with us or we break up with them. Next, we have, I'm not going to be able to go through all the organs, but I'll go through the major ones. We have the intestines. Because people love to just make things difficult, why is the small intestine called the small intestine and it's 10 feet long and the large intestine's only 5 feet long? Make it make sense, eh? But anyway, we have the small intestine that does all the sorting out. It works really hard to get all the waste and toxins together to give to the large intestine to excrete out of our body. And the texture of the intestines is like a towel, the ability to like absorb, but then keep out what we don't need. This system, this ability to sort out what we need and what we don't, needs a lot of rhythm. It's a pulse and it's a contraction. It's a real dance that's happening in there. So it needs a lot of movement, a lot of rhythm, a lot of water, a lot of space to do all this working out. And so it makes sense that people with a lot of trauma have IBS because they haven't had this support to sort things out. If you're someone who suffers from constipation a lot, I would ask, what are you holding on to? Are you doing too much and you're not giving your body a chance to sort it all out and to excrete? If you're living a very busy life and overdoing, constipation will naturally be something that people suffer from. And it's a sign that you're too much in your head and you're not giving your body enough energy to sort out what it needs. Also, it's connected to when we're really holding on. So it's natural. It's a natural thing. If you're really struggling to let go of something and you're suffering constipation, it makes sense. And then linked into that is obviously abandonment issues, our attachment style, avoiding and being anxiously attached. And then with diarrhea, what we see is that we forcefully push away. We're using too much force to let go. It's a very forceful expression of the body. Kidneys. They're a special filter system in our body to remove waste products from our blood and produce urine. Kidney infections are very common in women, typically. And you can see the relationship around women being able to keep toxic people out of their lives due to the patriarchy. And obviously, there's a history of having to be dependent on men for survival. And the ability to have boundaries, to not have contact with people who are toxic in our lives. Kidneys is linked to fear. And when someone is struggling to detach from someone who's toxic, it's linked to fear. With the ability to keep toxic people out of your life, it's important to look at your parents and any toxicity there and their relationship towards you and each other. It's a really important part to look at if you have kidney infections and looking at toxicity in your relationships. So the kidney, is at the back body and it's below your ribs, nested underneath your ribs. And that's why they are stimulated through twists in yoga. Then we had the liver. The liver is huge. She's a big one. She is located at the right hand side of your body, just below your diaphragm. The liver is connected to anger and the liver is connected to a lot of unprocessed emotion. And we see that as addiction really impacts the liver in terms of drug abuse, including alcohol and cigarettes and all the different ways we can abuse the body to not feel our feelings. And so the liver is much connected to the emotional health of the body. The psoas is a long ribbon-shaped muscle. It connects a lot of your body in terms of it connects to your spine, it connects to your lower back, your core, hips and upper legs. So it's really the soul of the body, that connection to the whole. And we have it on the left-hand side and the right-hand side. I'm laughing because I'm remembering a girl who noticed her psoas was tight. And I'm wondering, that's always a question, like, how free are you? If you have a lot of tension in that. But then again, I think who's truly free in this world? And none of us are free. Truly. Then, because I'm sorry if the three men that listen to this podcast, then we have the vulva, sex, pleasure, creativity. We have the womb that collects the blood, that the heart pumps around the body, that connection between womb and heart, that ability to create, the great mystery, the power of working in a 4-week cycle. Then we have the arms. The arms grew from the space of our lungs, of our heart, and connect us to our heart. Its ability to push away. That's why typically, when we look at if we look at the body like an animal, a woman as an animal, historically, women didn't have the ability to protect themselves and to push away and to really protect their space. And that's why, that would be linked to women not having as much strength in their arms as the rest of their body. And so that's a really powerful thing you can do, is to strengthen this part of the body. If you're someone who wants to build your ability to have boundaries and to protect yourself. It's also obviously to do with embrace and being able to nurture and to hug someone and hold someone. And then the hands, obviously, touch is so powerful. Skin to skin is so powerful. The hands, when we work with the hands, we are able to connect and heal our heart. And mudras and yoga is to do with that, offering intention and prayer from the heart space. Next, we have the shoulders. And we'll notice when we're heartbroken, the shoulders get very tense to protect the grief that's in our lungs and the pain that's in our heart, the heartbreak. It's also connected to worry. And so if we want to feel more free and let go of worries, just create more space around the shoulders so that we can open up the heart more. Self-worth is around, this is a very locked part of my body personally. It's around the bra strap at the back body. In the center is self-worth. The knees are connected to the ability to surrender. I was someone who used to jam my legs straight so much, and that's why it impacted my body in terms of, I had a lot of problems with my hips and my ability to have glutes. I couldn't activate my glutes because I was locking my legs out too much. So the knees are to do with ego and pride and surrender. The legs are your ability to support yourself. And it makes sense that someone who is carrying a lot of trauma hasn't got the ability to move. They've lost sense of their legs. And that's why there's so much trauma. That's why the trauma is held at the hips, right? When we experience trauma, we lose sense of our legs and feet. All the energy, all the sensation goes into our torso. And especially as a woman, we are programmed to usually fawn to appease the predator. We fawn or freeze is typically what the woman's body is designed to do, because it's the smartest way for us to survive, especially when the predators tend to be males. They tend to be physically stronger and we wouldn't be able to outrun them or fight them. And so you can see clearly why traumatic energy would be stored at the hips and we lose sense of our legs. And that's why it's really important to help a person to remember that they have legs and to sense into the legs once more, the ability to support themselves, the ability to move. And then we go back into the ankles, the ability to change direction. The feet dictate the whole health of the body. They're so important. Reflexology is a really potent holistic health therapy. The feet, such as the hands, the endpoints of the body, the ability to know our endpoints, that we have limits, that we have boundaries, is crucial. The feet have so many nerve endings because they have to work so hard to receive the information of the earth that there's energy coming up to meet us and be met. Like, we're not pushing down so hard on the ground that we're sinking, right? There's a beautiful balance that the feet can offer. Lips mirror the lips of our vulva, the labia. And so, the statistics around the many women have suffered sexual trauma is huge. And naturally, having sex before you're ready, letting someone enter you when you're just appeasing them, all this constitutes as trauma for the body. And so there's a lot of activity that can happen around the jaw and the lips connected to this. The jawline would mirror the hips also, and sexual trauma. The skin is the first part of our central nervous system, and that's why the skin so strongly can react to our environment to let us know that something's wrong. There is a lot of research that has a very strong link between babies with eczema and mothers with depression. And this has been a real roller coaster ride through that. I hope you enjoyed. And if you have any questions around it, which I'm sure you all do, please message me. I hope that helps you make sense of what your body's trying to tell you. Thank you so, so much for listening. And I hope you listen next week. And sending loads of love. Please let me know your crack, what's going on, and take such good care of you.